My specialist clinic never had enough slots to go around. I'd quietly swapped a shift with a colleague, so the out-of-town patients wouldn't get turned away. At the peak of the midday rush, a man burst through the door carrying a bleeding pregnant woman, shouting, "Doctor, please save her. Our appointment's this afternoon," but she started hemorrhaging out of nowhere. She's barely conscious. My wife's never been healthy. It's an ectopic pregnancy. This could kill her. I'm begging you, please save her. I frowned hard, set down the chart in my hands, and looked up. For emergencies, there's a dedicated team outside. Get her to the operating room first. I'll finish with this patient and come in right after. The words died in my throat. My eyes met those of the man I'd been married to for 9 years. Jack Delgado went silent instantly. The room was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. I laughed. So this is you on a business trip overseas? You really have been working hard. Panic flickered across his eyes for a split second, and he instinctively shifted the woman behind him. Viola, let me explain. It's not what you think. I pointed at the woman behind him, white as a sheet, doubled over her stomach, whimpering. Then what is it? She's an intern at my company. She collapsed out of nowhere, and I happened to be nearby, so I brought her in. I passed myself off as family, because I was afraid your hospital wouldn't take it seriously. None of her relatives are local. Jack delivered every word with a straight face, but his eyes wouldn't meet mine. I almost laughed out loud. Jack, do you think I'm blind? I'm not senile enough to fall for that. Last night on our video call you told me you were in a meeting in Newport City. What, do they have direct rockets from Newport City now? That's how fast you got back? Jack's face cycled between red and white. His mouth opened, grasping for something more to say. The woman in his arms let out a muffled groan and grabbed his arm, her voice thin. Jack, it hurts. I'm dying, aren't I? Lavinia, don't scare me like that. Jack panicked instantly, pulling her tight against him. He turned to me, and now there was something pleading in his eyes. Viola, please. Save her first, okay? Whatever this is, we'll deal with it at home. I folded my arms, my gaze ice cold. Save her? And why would I do that? You just called her your wife. So what does that make me? Jack's voice shot up. Viola, stop being unreasonable. This is a matter of life and death. My smile turned colder. You don't need to lecture me about life and death. I'm a doctor. I know more about that than you ever will. She got pregnant by someone else's husband, and now an ectopic pregnancy has her bleeding out. That's divine payback. If she had the nerve to be that shameless, she can live with the consequences. The words were still leaving my mouth, but my hand was already reaching for the phone. He hadn't expected me to be unmoved by threats or pleas. Rage took over and he screamed at me. She's hemorrhaging and barely alive, and you're standing there making snide remarks? Is this your idea of professional ethics? I ignored him. My fingers were already dialing the internal line. Prep or 3 immediately. Patient with ectopic pregnancy, massive hemorrhage, needs emergency surgery. Notify the Department of Anesthesiology and the blood bank to stand by. I hung up and looked at Jack. The fury on his face froze mid-expression. For once he had nothing to say. You. I didn't spare him another glance. I turned back to the patient I'd been seeing, wrote up her lab orders quickly, gave her a few reminders, told her to go get her tests done first. She glanced between us, took the hint, and slipped out without a word. On his way out, he shot me one last look of pity. Then it was just the 3 of us in the exam room. The air pressed down until it was hard to breathe. Jack watched me, something unreadable in his eyes. Viola, I know you're angry. But have you ever stopped to think about why we ended up here? I froze. I thought he would apologize. Feel some shred of guilt. Instead, he turned it around on me. What's that supposed to mean? His face darkened, his voice cold. You really don't get it? These 9 years, every single day, you were either at work or pulling overtime. How much of this family did you ever take care of? My birthday, you were in surgery. Our anniversary, you were on night shift. My mother was sick in the hospital, and you couldn't even show your face. All you ever think about is your patients, your surgeries. When have you ever cared about me? When have you ever cared about this family? Look at yourself. You live in that white coat, bare face, not even a decent dress to your name. Where do you even look like a woman? He was getting more worked up with every word, spit nearly hitting my face. I'm a normal man too. I need someone to be with me, someone to care about me. Lavinia's different. She's gentle, she's considerate, she understands people. She remembers my birthday. She plans surprises. When I'm tired, she rubs my shoulders. With her, I actually feel like I'm alive. My heart, like a dull knife, was dragging across it, cut after cut after cut. Pain that bored straight through my chest. 9 years of marriage. I'd gone from a newly graduated young doctor to an associate chief physician. And yes, in those 9 years, I'd shortchanged this family. I knew that. But none of it was for myself. When his startup was bleeding cash, when the whole thing nearly collapsed, I emptied my savings. I borrowed money from my parents. I got him through it. He worked until midnight every night. No matter how late my own shift ran, I left a light on for him. I kept a bowl of soup warm. When his mother got sick, I pulled every connection I had to get her the best doctor, the best room. Every day after work, straight to the hospital. Bedpans and sponge baths, a full month of it. All he saw was the birthday I missed. The anniversary I wasn't there for. He couldn't see everything I'd given. He couldn't see how many lives and deaths I faced every day in that hospital, or how much weight I carried. I stood there, cold all the way through. My silence must have looked like surrender to him, because he only got bolder. What? Nothing to say. Let me make this clear. This is on you too. If you weren't cold as a board every single day, I never would have cheated. Lavinia is carrying my child, and now something this serious has happened. You're a doctor. Saving her is your duty. If you don't save her today, that's settling a personal score. That's having no medical ethics. I'll go straight to the president's office and report you, and then I'll put the whole story online. Forget your specialist clinic. You won't practice medicine again. His words drove into me like a blade to the chest. I looked at the man I had loved for 9 years, and did not recognize him. My eyes burned, and I held everything back, refusing to let a single tear fall. A slow breath. My voice came out raw. Fine. I'll save her. But not because you threaten me, and not because I think any of this is my fault. Because I'm a doctor. When I put on this white coat, I don't get to let someone die. I turned my back on him and walked out of the exam room. Didn't look at him once. Outside the operating room, Jack was pacing back and forth, visibly agitated. I'd already changed into surgical scrubs, mask and cap on, ready to go in. He called out to me. I stopped. He hesitated, a flicker of suspicion in his eyes. You wouldn't sabotage anything on the operating table, would you? I could barely believe what I was hearing. It was almost laughable. You really think I'm that kind of person? How would I know? You hate us right now. What if you use this to get back at her? No. I'm not letting you operate on her alone. He turned to the director standing nearby. Director Lambert, I want a different doctor. Or at least add another doctor in there with her. Director Lambert frowned, barely containing his anger. Mr. Delgado, Dr. Pruitt is the best OBGYN in this hospital. She's performed well over 100 procedures like this, without a single complication. Her professional integrity is recognized by every person in this building. If you don't trust her, you're welcome to transfer to another hospital right now. He turned and walked away without another word. Jack's face went white, then gray. Of course he didn't dare transfer. Lavinia's condition was already critical. Any more delay and she could die. All he could do was clench his jaw and watch me walk through those doors. The operating room doors closed slowly behind me, sealing off everything outside. I took a deep breath, picked up the scalpel. In that moment, I wasn't Jack Delgado's wife. I was just a doctor. The surgery took 3 hours. When I stepped out, it was already 3 in the afternoon. I hadn't had a sip of water since morning. I pulled my mask down, and the world went black. My legs gave out and I hit the floor. The last thing I heard before everything disappeared was Jack's voice, frantic. Viola, how's Lavinia? Is she okay? I couldn't give him any answer at all. Each passing second chewed through what little patience Jack had left. Just before he could explode, a nurse came out of the operating room. She spotted me on the floor immediately and rushed over. Dr. Pruitt. Dr. Pruitt, what happened? She pulled a piece of candy from her pocket with practiced ease and slipped it into my mouth. Oh no, your blood sugar crashed again. You've been working 3 days straight. 2 surgeries last night, and then straight into this one today. Nobody's body can take that. Only then did Jack notice how pale I was. He froze for a second, then frowned. The nurse answered him flatly. Low blood sugar. She passed out. He scoffed. Whose fault is that but her own? She's faking it. Collapsing right now on purpose, so I'll feel guilty. This is her way of getting back at me. I'd barely caught my breath when I heard those words. My heart went dead. Completely, finally dead. I pushed the nurse's hand away and got to my feet slowly. Lavinia is out of danger. The nurses will take care of her from here. You can go see her now. I turned and walked away. Didn't look at him once. The next morning, I'd just reached the door to Lavinia's room when I heard her voice drifting out, saccharine sweet, dripping with helplessness. Jack, my stomach really hurts. Do you think that doctor messed up the surgery? I read a story online about a surgeon who left a scalpel inside a patient during a C-section, and another one who left gauze in there, and the patient got an infection and almost died. Jack, will I also? I'm so scared. Jack's voice went soft, soothing. Stop overthinking. You'll be fine. Lavinia only cried harder. But it really hurt so much. And I keep feeling dizzy and nauseous, like my whole body's wrong. Jack, do you think that Dr. Pruitt did it on purpose? She hates me so much. She must want to get back at me. I pushed the door open and walked in. Lavinia's crying cut off instantly. She shrank into Jack's arms without thinking. Jack looked up at me, his expression darkening on the spot. Viola. Perfect timing. Lavinia's stomach hurts, she's dizzy, she's nauseous. What the hell did you do to her in that surgery? I looked at him. My voice was steady. The surgery was successful. Mild abdominal pain and nausea are normal post-op reactions. They'll pass in a few days. He curled his lip in a cold smile. What kind of normal reaction hurts like that? You're just getting back at her, and you know it. If you're going to make accusations, bring evidence. You can check the surgical records or have another doctor examine her. If there really was a problem with my procedure, I'll take full responsibility. He laughed in disbelief, shoving to his feet. Take responsibility? If something happens to Lavinia, you think responsibility covers it? I looked at him and felt nothing but exhaustion. Suit yourself. I still have other patients to see. If you need something, call the nurse. I turned to leave. He grabbed my arm. Don't you walk away from me. I wrenched free. That was when Lavinia let out a sharp scream and collapsed flat on the bed. Jack startled, lunging to the bedside. Lavinia. Lavinia, what's wrong? Wake up. She didn't respond at all. Jack whipped around and fixed me with a vicious glare. What did you do to her? I didn't do anything. And you still dare stand there and deny it. He rushed at me and seized my collar. You came in here on your rounds and drugged her, didn't you? You vicious woman. If she doesn't wake up today, I'll kill you. Then he raised his hand and slapped me across the face. A sharp crack. My head snapped to the side, blood seeping from the corner of my mouth. The entire room went silent. Jack froze too. He stared at his own hand, a flicker of panic in his eyes. It was gone almost instantly, swallowed by anger. You brought this on yourself. I turned my head back slowly and looked at him. No expression on my face. Whatever was left inside me died right there. I reached up and gently pushed his hand away, smoothed the wrinkles he'd twisted into my white coat. Then I turned and walked out of the room without looking back. Back in my office, I took out my phone. I called a college friend who'd become a lawyer. Asked her to draft divorce papers for me as fast as she could. After I hung up, I stared out the window. The sun was bright. Inside me, everything was ice. My phone rang. I thought it was my friend calling back with an update and answered quickly. The next second, my mother-in-law's voice came through, scorching with fury. Viola, you shameless, worthless woman. I must have been out of my mind letting you into this family. Can't have a baby yourself, so you won't let anyone else have one either. How can you be so vicious? I heard all about it. That poor girl was carrying Jack's child and nearly died. Ectopic pregnancy, my foot. We never had anything like that in our family before. You're the doctor. You must have done something to her. Ever since you married into this family, we haven't had a single day of peace. And now you want to kill my grandchild? What kind of person are you? I'm warning you, Viola. If anything happens to my grandchild, I will make you pay with your life. The more she screamed, the more worked up she got. I listened in silence. The pain in my chest was so sharp I could barely breathe. 9 years of giving everything I had, and in the end, none of it mattered as much as the lump of flesh in Lavinia's belly. When she'd finally run out of venom, I spoke slowly. Mrs. Delgado, ectopic pregnancies are usually caused by the patient taking contraceptives on her own. The hospital's diagnostic report is stamped and sealed. No one can alter it. You want answers, ask your precious son. I hung up before she could respond. Then I blocked her number. Half an hour later, my classmate sent over the divorce papers. I printed them out, signed my name, and headed toward Lavinia's ward with the papers in hand. But the moment I reached the doorway, I froze. The room was packed. Reporters everywhere, cameras on every shoulder. President Bennett and Director Lambert stood in the middle, sweating through their explanations. Jack stood off to one side, his expression dark. The second he saw me, every lens in the room swung in my direction. Dr. Pruitt, is it true you made a critical error during surgery that caused the patient's massive hemorrhage? Online sources say you deliberately retaliated against the patient over a personal grudge. Is that true? There are allegations that your specialist title was obtained through connections, and that you lack real qualifications. Is that accurate? The questions hit me from every side, one on top of another. I was penned in. Couldn't move. President Bennett waved his hands frantically. Everyone, please. The hospital is currently investigating this matter, and we will provide a satisfactory response. Jack cut through him, voice cold. Investigate what? The facts are right here. She took a personal grudge into that operating room, botched the surgery, and nearly killed my girlfriend. My girlfriend is still in the operating room right now. They don't even know if she'll make it. He jabbed a finger at me, eyes venomous. And this killer right here is walking around like nothing happened, clocking in, doing her rounds. A doctor this cold-blooded, this devoid of ethics, has no business being anywhere near patients. I demand that Viola Pruitt get on her knees right now, in front of every camera in this room, and apologize to my girlfriend. Admit what she did. I watched him screaming himself hoarse, championing justice for another woman. And the irony hit me like something physical. He was the one who cheated. He brought his mistress to my hospital and forced me to save her. And now, to avenge that same mistress, he was twisting every fact to destroy me. I took a deep breath and forced the fury back down. Jack Delgado, you know exactly what you've done. You cheated. Shut your mouth. Before I could finish, he lunged at me. The slap cracked through the room like a gunshot. Another one. This time he put his whole body behind it. I staggered back several steps, nearly falling. One of my teeth knocked out of my mouth. Jack pointed straight at my face, screaming, "Viola, say one more word and I'll rip your mouth apart." Then he turned on President Bennett. "I want a decision on Viola Pruitt, now. Or I take this above your heads and make sure this hospital's reputation is finished." President Bennett looked at me, then at the wall of reporters around us. He hesitated for a long moment, then let out a sigh. "Viola, for the sake of the hospital's reputation, you're on administrative leave, effective immediately." Administrative leave for a doctor on the rise, it was a career death sentence. And Jack still wasn't satisfied. He let out a cold laugh. "That's it. A human life isn't even worth someone's job to you people?" The words barely left his mouth. A mob surged through the ward doors, hoisting banners. 8 bold characters across the fabric. "A life for a life, justice must be served." They chanted as they pushed inside. The ward dissolved into chaos. The live stream chat exploded, and the story shot straight to the top of trending. The hospital's reputation cratered in real time. President Bennett was cornered. He gritted his teeth. "Fine. Effective immediately, Viola Pruitt is terminated from all duties at this hospital." I stood frozen, then laughed until tears spilled down my face. Jack frowned. "What are you laughing at?" I didn't answer him. I looked at President Bennett and nodded. "Fine. I accept the decision." Jack had just started to relax. The next second, I pulled the divorce papers from my bag and held them up to the cameras. I looked straight at Jack, every word deliberate. "I accept the hospital's punishment. I accept kneeling and apologizing to Miss Fox. But before any of that, there's something I need to say." The reporters pressed closer, the lenses of their cameras reflecting the harsh, fluorescent lighting of the hospital corridor. The red recording lights blinked, like tiny predatory eyes. I stood my ground, my cheek throbbing from the impact of Jack's hand. I could taste the metallic tang of blood from where my tooth had cut into the inside of my lip, but I didn't wipe it away. Let the cameras see it. Let them record every single drop. I took the thick envelope of documents and pulled out the divorce papers, holding them directly in front of the main camera of the leading local news outlet. "This is a petition for divorce, signed by me, Viola Pruitt, 30 minutes ago," I said, my voice steady, carrying clearly over the murmurs of the crowd. "My marriage to Jack Delgado is over. And it is ending today." The camera zoomed in on the document. The bold letters "divorce agreement" were unmistakable. Jack's face transformed from triumphant rage to sudden, stark panic. He lunged forward to snatch the papers, but Director Lambert stepped between us, his face set in a hard line. "Mr. Delgado, keep your hands to yourself," the director warned, his voice low. "And dangerous. You've already assaulted a physician in front of 30 witnesses. Do not make this worse." "She's lying," Jack shouted, pointing a trembling finger at me. "She's trying to shift the focus. This has nothing to do with our marriage. She botched a surgery out of jealousy." I looked past Director Lambert straight into the camera lens. 9 years ago, I married Jack Delgado. At the time, he was a penniless entrepreneur with a failing startup. I emptied my medical school savings, borrowed money from my own parents, and took on double shifts at this very hospital to keep his company afloat. Last night, my husband told me he was on an urgent business trip in Newport City. But at noon today, he burst into my clinic carrying his mistress, Lavinia Fox, who was hemorrhaging from an ectopic pregnancy. He bypassed the emergency room, brought her directly to my private clinic, and demanded I perform the surgery because he claimed his wife was dying. A collective murmur rose from the crowd of journalists. Notebooks were scribbled. And frantically, the live chat on the streaming screens began to scroll so fast. It was a blur of characters. "I am an OBGYN, I continued, my gaze locking onto Jack, whose eyes were darting toward the exits. "I have sworn the Hippocratic Oath. Despite knowing this woman was carrying my husband's child, I spent 3 hours in the operating room saving her life. I did not leave her side until she was completely out of danger, to the point of my own physical collapse from low blood sugar. And my reward? This morning, when Miss Fox experienced standard post-operative nausea and abdominal pain, they accused me of medical malpractice. And just now, Jack Delgado struck me twice in front of all of you." I turned my head slightly, showing the deep purple bruise forming on my jaw, and the blood still seeping from my lip. Is this the vicious, cold-blooded killer you wanted to expose, Mr. Delgado? I asked softly. Or am I simply a wife who refused to let your mistress die on my table, only for you to attempt to destroy my career to cover up your own infidelity? A reporter from the local Metropolitan Daily shoved her microphone toward Jack. Mr. Delgado, is it true that the patient is your mistress? Did you falsely identify her as your wife to obtain emergency treatment? No. It's not like that. Jack stammered, his forehead slick with sweat. He tried to shield his face from the cameras, a stark contrast to his boastful behavior moments earlier. She's an employee. I was just helping. Then why did you call her your girlfriend on camera just 2 minutes ago? The reporter pressed relentlessly. You explicitly stated she botched the surgery and nearly killed my girlfriend. We have it on tape, Mr. Delgado. Jack's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The mob that had burst in earlier with the banners, "A life for a life," suddenly looked confused. They were paid actors, hired by Jack to create a public scene and force the hospital into a quick settlement. Now realizing they were being broadcast live on a national stream as accomplices to a domestic cover-up, they began to quietly lower their banners and slip back into the stairwell. President Bennett stood in the corner, his face pale as paper. He realized too late that by firing me instantly to protect the hospital's short-term reputation, he had instead aligned the institution with a cheating, abusive husband and a fraudulent malpractice claim. Before he could speak, the doors to the operating room corridor swung open. Dr. Ronald Evans, the chief of general surgery and one of the most respected medical authorities in the province, stepped out. He was still in his surgical scrubs, his expression grim. Jack saw him and seemed to find his voice again. He rushed toward Dr. Evans, desperate to regain control of the narrative. Dr. Evans, you reoperated on Lavinia, right? Tell the cameras what Viola did to her. Tell them how she ruined her organs. Dr. Evans did not look at Jack. He walked past him, stopped in front of the reporters, and pulled off his surgical cap. I have just completed an exploratory laparoscopy on the patient, Lavinia Fox. Dr. Evans said, his voice carrying the weight of 30 years of clinical authority. The reporters hushed, pointing their directional microphones toward him. We initiated the procedure due to the patient's sudden collapse and allegations of post-operative internal bleeding or surgical error, Dr. Evans explained. However, upon entering the abdominal cavity, we found absolutely no active bleeding, no retained foreign objects, and no damage to the surrounding tissues. The salpingectomy performed by Dr. Pruitt yesterday was, from a surgical standpoint, entirely standard and clean. Then why did she faint? Jack roared, his voice cracking with desperation. She was screaming in pain. She went unconscious. You're covering for her. Because she's your colleague, Mr. Delgado, Dr. Evans said, his voice dropping into a cold, professional register. We fainted her ourselves under controlled conditions to run a full diagnostic. But more importantly, we ran an immediate blood toxicology screen. When we saw her vitals fluctuating prior to the exploratory surgery, we found extremely high levels of aspirin and clopidogrel in her system. These are potent blood thinners. They were not prescribed by this hospital, nor were they administered by any of our nursing staff. I turned my head sharply to look at Dr. Evans. Blood thinners? An ectopic pregnancy post-op patient taking high doses of anticoagulants is at extreme risk of secondary internal hemorrhaging, Dr. Evans continued, his eyes turning to look directly at Jack. Fortunately, she did not ingest enough to cause a fatal bleed, but it was certainly enough to induce severe abdominal cramps, drops in blood pressure, and artificial symptoms that mimic a surgical complication. A cold silence fell over the corridor. Furthermore, Dr. Evans added, pulling a small plastic bag from his pocket, our floor nurse found this empty blister pack of clopidogrel hidden inside the tissue box next to Miss Fox's bed. The prescription label on the box was registered to a Jack Delgado from a local pharmacy 3 days ago. The cameras pivoted in unison back to Jack. The puzzle pieces fell into place with terrifying speed. Jack's startup wasn't just struggling, it was dead. He had been drowning in debt, and he needed a massive influx of cash to avoid bankruptcy and potential jail time for financial irregularities. He had used Lavinia's ectopic pregnancy as an opportunity. If they could frame a high-earning, reputable specialist, his own wife, for a horrific medical error, they could sue the hospital for millions. Lavinia had taken the blood thinners voluntarily, or Jack had fed them to her, to create the physical symptoms of a botched surgery. You, Jack whispered, his eyes wide as he looked at the plastic bag in Dr. Evans' hand. That's my mother's medication. She must have left it there by mistake. Your mother is registered at our cardiology clinic, Director Lambert said, stepping forward with his tablet in hand. But her prescription is for low-dose aspirin, not clopidogrel. This specific batch was purchased by you, paid for with your credit card, just 48 hours ago. I. Jack backed up until his spine hit the corridor wall. This is no longer a medical dispute, Director Lambert said, turning to the two security guards standing at the end of the hall. This is attempted insurance fraud, extortion, and deliberate endangerment of a patient's life. Call the police. And as for the media, Director Lambert added, looking at the reporters, our hospital will be holding a formal press conference in 2 hours to address this malicious attempt to slander one of our finest physicians. He turned his gaze to President Bennett, who was sweating profusely. And we will also be discussing a restructuring of our executive board, starting with the presidency. President Bennett looked as if he might faint. I stood in the center of the hall, the divorce papers still in my hand. I walked over to Jack, who was now trembling, his hands sliding down the wall. I placed the divorce papers on his chest. Sign them, Jack, I said, my voice barely louder than a whisper. Or I will let my lawyer present the evidence of your financial fraud to the police along with the criminal charges for assault. Jack looked at the paper, then up at my bruised face. The arrogance, the smug superiority he had carried for 9 years, was completely gone. He was nothing but a hollow, desperate man who had gambled his wife's life and career and lost everything. He took the pen from his pocket with a shaking hand, leaned against the wall, and signed his name at the bottom of the page. 3 days later, I sat in the quiet of my new apartment. It was a small, one-bedroom place near the city park, far away from the grand townhouse I had bought with my own salary, but where Jack had lived like a king. I had stripped my name from the mortgage, leaving Jack with the sole responsibility for the massive monthly payments he could no longer afford now that his company was under criminal investigation for tax evasion and investment fraud. The hospital's board of directors had fired President Bennett within 24 hours of the scandal. Director Lambert had been appointed as the interim president. On my desk lay an official letter from the hospital board, offering me a full reinstatement, a formal public apology, and a promotion to chief of the OBGYN department, along with a significant salary increase. My phone rang. It was Director Lambert. Viola, he said, his tone warm and respectful. I hope you're resting well. The board has finalized the terms of your return. We've also cleared your record completely. The administrative leave was wiped from your file, and we've prepared a public statement highlighting your exceptional work during Miss Fox's surgery. I stared out the window at the autumn leaves drifting through the air. Thank you, Director Lambert, I said quietly. I appreciate everything you and Dr. Evans did to uncover the truth. So, when can we expect you back? The department is a bit of a mess without you, and the patients are already asking when your specialist clinic will reopen. I took a deep breath. I won't be returning, Director. A long silence followed on the other end of the line. Viola, if it's about the salary or the terms, we can negotiate. I know, Bennett treated you terribly, but it's not about Bennett, and it's not about the money, I said gently. For 9 years, my life was defined by that hospital. I lived in that white coat. I missed birthdays, anniversaries, and my own health because I thought that was the only way to prove my worth. But that environment, it allowed people like Jack and Bennett to take everything from me because they knew I would always put the patients first. Where will you go? Lambert asked, his voice filled with genuine regret. I've accepted an offer from the National Medical Research Center in the capital, I said, a small, genuine smile finally reaching my lips. It's a research and clinical position. Fewer overnight shifts, more focus on developing new surgical techniques for high-risk pregnancies. And most importantly, it's a fresh start. They are lucky to have you, Lambert sighed. If you ever want to come back, the door is always open. Thank you, Director. I hung up the phone and looked at the packing boxes stacked in the corner of the room. My phone vibrated again. This time, it was a text from my lawyer. Jack's company has officially declared bankruptcy. The police have formally charged him with insurance fraud and reckless endangerment regarding Lavinia Fox. His mother tried to call our office to ask if you would drop the assault charges. I told her we are proceeding to trial. I didn't reply. I deleted the message, blocked the number, and turned my phone off. The day before my departure for the capital, I was packing the last of my books when there was a frantic knocking at my door. I opened it to find my former mother-in-law, Mrs. Delgado. She looked 10 years older than she had on the phone 3 days ago. Her hair was untidy, her expensive designer handbag was scuffed, and the arrogant sneer she usually wore when looking at my plain, unwomanly face had been replaced by a desperate, tearful grimace. Viola, thank God you're still here, she gasped, trying to push her way into the apartment. I stood firmly in the doorway, blocking her path. Mrs. Delgado, you are not welcome here. Viola, please, she sobbed, grabbing my sleeve. You have to help Jack. The police are going to send him to prison. His company is gone there, repossessing the house, and that horrible woman Lavinia is cooperating with the prosecutors to save herself. She's claiming Jack forced her to take those pills. I looked down at her hand on my sleeve. Let go of me. She flinched and pulled her hand back, but her begging didn't stop. He's your husband, Viola. 9 years. You can't just throw him to the wolves over a little mistake. Every man strays once in a while, but he always came home to you. You're a doctor, you make good money, you can hire the best lawyers. He is not my husband, I said, my voice deadpan and flat. He signed the divorce papers. The court finalized the dissolution yesterday morning. But the assault charges, she cried. The police said if you don't drop the domestic abuse and assault charges, he's looking at up to 3 years in prison because it was done in public and caught on live television. Viola took care of you when you were young. I let you marry into our family. You let me marry into your family because your son was bankrupt and needed my credit score and my savings to clear his debts. I corrected her, my voice rising slightly, cold and sharp as a scalpel. And when you were sick, I was the one who cleaned your bedpans and gave you sponge baths while your gentle, considerate son was out at clubs with Lavinia Fox. Where was his gratitude? Then, he was stressed. The business was a sham, I said. And so was his love for you. Did you know he used your medical history to purchase the drugs he used to poison his mistress? He didn't care about her, he didn't care about me, and he didn't care about you. He only cares about himself. Mrs. Delgado fell to her knees on the welcome mat, weeping loudly. Please, Viola, have some mercy. We have nothing left. The bank is taking everything. I looked down at her, and to my surprise, I felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no hatred, and certainly no pity. The well of my emotions had been completely drained by these people, and now it was dry. I gave you 9 years of mercy, I said softly, and you used it to poison my life. Goodbye, Mrs. Delgado. I closed the door slowly, locking the deadbolt with a solid, final click. Her weeping continued outside for several minutes, but I simply turned on my stereo, letting the soft classical music drown out the sounds of the past. 6 months later, the operating room at the National Medical Research Center was unlike any I had ever worked in before. The walls were lined with state-of-the-art diagnostic screens. The surgical team moved with the quiet, synchronized efficiency of a high-precision watch. Dr. Pruitt, the patient's vitals are stable. We are ready to begin the laparoscopic uterine reconstruction, the chief resident said, looking at me with immense respect. I stood at the scrub sink, washing my hands under the warm water. Ibura no makeup, my face was bare, and my hair was tucked tightly beneath a blue surgical capitul. I looked at my reflection in the polished steel of the sink mirror. I still wore the white coat, but it no longer felt like a shroud of self-sacrifice. It felt like armor. I walked into the operating room, holding my hands up. The nurse helped me into my sterile gown and gloves. Scalpel, I said clearly. The metal instrument was placed in my hand, cool and familiar. For the next 4 hours, there were no thoughts of Jack, no memories of the betrayal, and no ghosts of the past. There was only the precise, beautiful art of medicine. When the surgery was over, I walked out of the department into the bright, sunlit courtyard of the research center. I sat down on a stone bench, holding a cup of hot coffee. A cool spring breeze rustled the cherry blossom trees, sending pale pink petals drifting onto my lap. My phone chimed with a news notification from my hometown. Former entrepreneur Jack Delgado sentenced to 5 years for insurance fraud, embezzlement, and domestic assault. Co-defendant Lavinia Fox receives a suspended sentence in exchange for state testimony. I stared at the headline for a moment. Then with a simple swipe of my thumb, I cleared the notification. I took a sip of my coffee, feeling the warmth spread through my chest. The sun was bright, the sky was clear, and for the first time in 9 years I was completely, beautifully alive.